Providing a good education is essential for any nation trying to secure a future of progress. In South America, many countries have made it a top priority to improve education and its schools. One of those nations is Brazil, the largest country on the continent. But with a population of almost 200 million, only 1/3 of Brazilian children finish the 6th grade. Joining us now is Andrea Lisboa de Sousa, an education policy expert from Brazil, to discuss the current state of its school system. Thank you so much for joining us. Andrea, you know, the school system is overseen by the federal government, offering both private schools and public schools. So what is the difference between the two, especially when it comes to the quality of education?
Yes, in Brazil, the public educational system is totally free, and the access is for everybody. And because we have a large population who access the system, we really don't have a better preparation for our teachers. We don't have the best trainings, and we still have, a lot of challenges with infrastructure, with the principals preparation to provide a better qualification. And who can pay and afford the private system, they access a better quality of education. And this has an implication in the higher education level, because who was able to afford the private schools for middle and high schools, they will access the public universities in Brazil, which are the best quality and excellence level in Brazil. And who attended the public schools that had this non-really qualified education, they will to the private colleges and universities. And so this is a contradiction in Brazil, even though in the last decade, a lot of measures, and we'll be able to talk about that, has been, enacted in order to try to change, this unequal, system.
So what does that show? Because it is opposite. You pay for education at the lower levels, you access the free education at the university level, and then if you can't afford private school when you're younger, then you pay to go to college.
Yes, this is what has been in Brazil. This is a contradiction, and it has to do with the history of Brazil. Brazil is a huge country, rich country as well, but we had not only racial discrimination in Brazil, but a social discrimination, economic inequality in Brazil. So the majority of these children, youth that goes to the public system, they are poor, black, and indigenous. So they don't have all the means to pay for the private system. And when they want to access college degree, they have to apply for scholarships, they have to try to pay by themselves, so they can have access to the system, the higher education system.
School attendance in Brazil is mandatory between the ages of 7 and 14, but yes, at one point it always was not enforced. Is that the case?
Before it wasn't, but we have a national federal law which made mandatory the school attendance, and today, I would say that we have almost 100% of the attendance because of the new policies we have had in the past, 10 years. We had like a program such as Bolsa Família, and this program, how this helped, this poor family to access schools. They receive a financial support, and it's mandatory that the parents send the children to school in order to receive this financial support. And because of that, we have raised, the school attendance.
So it sounds like that part is working. Has that been reflected in the performance of the kids who have been going to school on a regular basis under Bolsa Família?
Yes, this is another issue. They are at the school, but it doesn't mean that the school is prepared for them and that the school has all the infrastructure needed for them. Before 2000, I have been to schools in Brazil without restrooms, for example. And only, in the last decade that we have been working the infrastructure, and we have a huge difference also between the rural areas and the urban area in Brazil, urban schools and rural schools. So again, I would say that after the law, which made it mandatory, after all these, social policies, the school attendance is increasing a lot in Brazil.
Even in the rural areas, you're not seeing children working to help their families as much
because
anymore.
of the Bolsa Familia, and because also we have programs for transportation in the rural area, so they can, have free transportation to schools. We have a specific program for rural schools in Brazil, which has been very important, to reach this population.
What are some of the other advancements Brazil has made in education in recent years? What are some of the things that you've seen have worked, some of the reforms that have been successful?
Yes, I would highlight, we have been, a lot of change. I would highlight two main reforms. The first one was a federal law which made mandatory the teaching of African Brazilian history and culture in the school system. And why we needed this law? Because in the history of Brazil, in the textbooks, in all the history of the educational system, we don't learn about the history of the blacks and the African enslaved in Brazil, which is a contradiction in a country with made up 50% of blacks, right? So this law came out in 2003, and since then we have had a lot of policies and trainings to help to include, African history and culture in the public school system. And the second and most important also change that we had is the affirmative action program in Brazil. We had a federal law, we call a law of quota in Brazil, which made mandatory the access for poor high school students from the public schools, because we had, that gap, as I told you before. So students from public schools, poor students, and blacks, they will have access to the federal universities in Brazil. So this is a way of changing this inequality, not only the social economic inequality, but also the racial inequality in Brazil.
What are some of the issues you think need to have more attention, need some improvement? Some of the budget for education goes to retired teachers. Has that been a problem?
I would say that this is not a problem because, this is the retired teachers, they have the rights to have, their retirement salary. What I think is a problem in Brazil is the wealth distribution. While if you don't solve the inequality, this whole issue of wealth distribution in Brazil, we have like the 5% of Brazilians that are the most rich ones, being able to access all this income and wealth, and we have basically 95% of the population, which are still in the below the line of poverty. So I would say that the retirement is not a problem, but it's the wealth distribution and how we were going to make this more equal for everybody.
All right. Andrea Lisboa de Sousa, thank you so much for joining us on America's Now.
You are welcome. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
America's Now